But that's one of the problems, among others. Anyway, I don't want to go too
I started out the question about nuclear negotiations. Would a post-Islamic republic pursue nuclear technology? Recognizing that much of the infrastructure is not workable at the moment, but there are still Iranian nuclear scientists. Yeah. There is know-how. I'm sure there are sites that the United States and Israel did not find. Would it pursue nuclear?
From the very beginning, it just didn't make any sense for me to consider Iran as a country that would be in a situation to actually have nuclear reactors for a number of reasons.
But didn't your father start the program?
Well, I will explain. But let me. Okay, we'll go back. Yes, in the 60s, when we were starting to look at other sources to provide electricity and not use fuel only as a source for generation of electricity, thinking more of the byproducts in petrochemicals and what have you. At the time, we started looking at different options. There were gas turbines who were not efficient enough at the time and rather expensive. Solar energy, which was really its infancy, nothing to do what it could be today. And of course, nuclear. And we came to nuclear because ultimately it was more cost effective, which is why Iran signed the NPT. We had shares in Framatome, which was, I think, the entity that would have provided the nuclear rods for the two first reactors that were supposed to come online in Bushehr in 1982. And of course, in the middle of all this, revolution happened. That was a calculation back then. But when I look at Iran on a seismic plate, very little water and access to water in low population area, it just doesn't lend itself to it. And I think today there are so many technologies in renewable energy, solar being one of them, that Iran is a perfect candidate for, that we can certainly bypass that nuclear aspect in 2025 as opposed to 1971 or 72. Anyway, that's my personal viewpoint. I leave it to the experts to assess that. I'm just sorry to see that billions and billions of dollars have been wasted on this program that has yet to generate in any practical way electricity. But something that is even worse is that as far as the nuclear ambition program of this regime, it has cost our country over $1 trillion worth of loss or damage. So the whole narrative is shifting towards let's be sane in mind, let's be concerned about environmental issues. And I've been spending a lot of time with Iranian entrepreneurs and American entrepreneurs, many of them in the fields of how can we best tackle this thing and Iran's energy needs and requirement. And more often than not, the nuclear issue doesn't even pop up, number one. Number two, I think that as far as the possibilities of having more impact in terms of Iran's economy, I think these other industries will provide much more immediate jobs for the country than any nuclear program would. But again, this is my personal opinion. So the future of Iran has to be on par with making sure that we are using the safest technologies, the ones that are most beneficial, and steer away from anything that could be subject to question. And we will operate in full transparency as we did before, unlike a regime that has never been transparent on the subject. And if you ask Grossi and the IAEA what's their take on the Iranian ambitions, they still won't be able to give you a clear answer. Reason more when you ask me about the nuclear negotiations. That's one of the issues. Can you actually trust them and what they tell you or what they commit to?
Let's go back to domestic politics in Iran. Your critics, my apologies, your critics, not me, they contend that, one, the Iranian opposition is terribly divided, and that the diaspora community is terribly divided, and that you've been unable to unite the diaspora community. So they question whether you'd be able to unite Iranians around a transition after the collapse of the Islamic Republic. How do you answer that question? What is the state of your movement, and how do you plan to unite Iranians who have very, very different views about a post-Islamic Republic Iran?
Well, for anybody who is interested in the facts rather than the narratives, I will point them to the facts. And the best fact that I can point them to when it comes to your question is last month when I was in Germany, we had the Munich conference, which was a conference that was the vastest and more diverse ever within the Iranian opposition in 46 years. including people from different walks of life, ideologies. Former Marxists and leftists were there, Republicans were there, representative of Iranian ethnic groups were there, representative of the latest wave of Iranian victims to the regime's repression during the Mahsa revolution, kids that were shot in the eye, their grieving mothers. They were all there. And it's on record for everybody to see. And the video is out there. You can go and study that. Yesterday, a new website was launched, which is the Iran Rising website. It was launched about 9 a.m. yesterday. As of 10:30 this morning, I asked one of my assistants what was the response. We had over 1.5 million views already in 24 hours. And people from inside Iran are putting their names out there to join this campaign and participate. If that's not an indication of unity and solidarity, I don't know what else I can put on the table as a proof to you people. So if you go and check that out, these are the facts, these are the measurables, and it's on that basis that I would say Iranians are becoming far more united. The opposition is getting more and more organized in working together on a common agenda, and the response from inside has been, of course, the strongest ever. And the interesting thing is that I announced this platform on the day of a national celebration of one of our cultural days, which is Mehregan, which is the celebration of light. And we have never had this particular celebration as vivid as others, like Nowruz, for instance, or Yalda, which are other national celebrated cultural holidays. For the first time in 46 years, Mehregan was at the widest possible scale celebrated in Iran. And that was also part of my call, let's do it on this day. I think that shows the connect, that shows the way people conglomerate, and how they respond to me and my appeal to them. And these are all the measurables. Now, of course, some people hate my guts and don't like my face. I can't do anything about that. But I think that if you were to take an opinion poll in Iran, and in fact there's a lot of data about that, surely a lot of people know that I'm, among anybody else, the most popular and the most trusted element, which is why they like to respond to me to be able to lead this movement for them.
Part of your narrative is that the Islamic Republic will come to an end. Now, forever is a long time, but it has demonstrated resilience that I think people did not expect. It's been under sanction for a very, very long time. This past summer, it took 12 days of pounding by the Israelis and then the United States. And the targets that the Israelis hit were not just nuclear infrastructure or ballistic missile production, but as we discussed, instruments of the regime's repression. Yet the regime seems to be stable and durable. Why should we expect anything other?
Well, first of all, you have a society that lives 60% of them under the poverty line. Let's not forget that in 1979, the rial was exchanged at 76 rials to the dollar. As of yesterday, it's 1,180,000 rials to the dollar. For the same nation with the same amount of oil and gas in its reserves. And this is before snapback kicks in. I don't see in what way that could be tenable for a starving nation on the one hand, and for the regime not to have access to this kind of revenue, and how the hell they're going to survive and maintain their war machine going on. It's just a matter of time. In that sense, it is vulnerable. I'm as curious as you are to see the effects of snapback and what would that bring into the issue. And I think it's also the further isolation of Iran, because if you look at what may happen as a result of whether or not Hamas will accept the deal or not, then I think that this will be a time to see to what extent internationally the regime is also more than ever isolated and curtailed. These are the actual dynamics in front of us. One is domestic, one is on the international scene. And I think we can, on that basis, say that if whatever until now has helped the regime somehow manage to survive, but at the end it will fall. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And the real issue is, and I remember the end of the Cold War, not many nations, particularly in the West, were prepared for the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union. the mindset was the Berlin Wall might be around in our lifetime. That's what I thought, by the way, and yet it fell. But were we prepared for the aftermath? This is one of those cases that I urge a lot of you to say, regardless of the status quo, you have to factor in that there could be a change. And if that change were to occur, are we prepared for it? Not to fall in the same problems in the post-Soviet Union collapse that was not necessarily anticipated. This time we can anticipate. And in fact, this is the answer to a lot of people who keep saying, we don't know what's going to be happening after the regime collapse. Is it going to be more chaos? Is it going to be more instability? Blah, 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 blah. And I think that we have enough data and actual measurable resources, both at home and abroad, to prove to you that Iran is not a country where you would face a vacuum or civilian strife. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is not Iraq. It has its own dynamics, its own polity, its own civil society, although heavily repressed, but certainly alive and well. And I think it is that element that can provide you that what you're investing this time on is not a change of behavior by a regime that you cannot trust at the end of the day, but liberate a nation that see eye to eye on the same visions and principles and can be an actual partner over there. America by itself cannot and will not be able to maintain global stability without having some partner in that case. Yes, the Abraham Accord was a good start. Clearly it was sabotaged by the Islamic regime for obvious reasons. And I've been saying this, and I said this when I was in Tel Aviv 2 years ago in a press conference, that if we elevate the Abraham Accords to the Cyrus Accords, meaning that a different Iran that is committed to regional peace and cordial relationship with our neighbors will be the element that will seal the deal and allow for that process to take place. So we don't have to worry about the relationship between Tehran and Jerusalem and Riyadh and all the other countries in the region. On the contrary, we create an environment that is conducive to maintaining even more stability and encourage economic development, everything that our country needs. And it cannot happen so long as this regime is there. And the regime knows that. It's just trying to buy time. Its ultimate tactic has always been buy time, hoping that there won't be a Trump in the White House or there won't be somebody that will be more aggressive as opposed to appeasing. That's what they've been doing as a tactic. And I think the Iranian people see through it, and I hope people outside the world begin to see through it as well.